You, like so many other attorneys, are put in a position where a client comes to you, if it's a court-appointed case or even if it's a paid client. My question to you, do those clients get treated different, not just by yourself, but by overall, in your opinion or what you have observed? Do clients get treated differently, whether they're a court-appointed attorney or a paid attorney?
I think probably the main difference there is I think paid attorneys are willing to do a little more hand-holding than court-appointed attorneys. For court-appointed attorneys, Virginia is the lowest paying state in the country for what court-appointed attorneys are paid. And so, in my opinion, if you get into doing court-appointed work, you accept the fact that you're not going to get paid well for it, and you do it anyway. And you don't take out the fact that you're not being paid much, you don't take that out on your client. And I have always tried to treat my clients in court-appointed cases no differently than clients that have retained me for a bundle of money.
And I love the way you answered that, because Professor Goodman, we have to talk about money. Many of us believe that money does play a large role when the attorney has the ability to be able to financially prepare a case, because we can look at, for instance, O.J. Simpson. Was that case well funded in your opinion?
Oh, yes, it was. There was an incredible defense team assembled for that case. I'm sure there were thousands of hours billed by each and every member of that defense team. Either it was well funded or the attorneys got stuck with the bill.
And that leads to my next question. What, as an attorney, how do you define a good client?
One that's honest. Even if the client is guilty on a criminal case, it helps to know that, because it's up to the Commonwealth in criminal cases in Virginia or in any state, it's up to the state to determine, to prove beyond a reasonable doubt each and every element of the crime charged. And it's their duty to do that, and you do what you can to prevent them from proving their case. If you know what really happened, it's easier. Yeah, and I have heard that some attorneys don't really want to know. In my case, I want to know what really happened. I don't want to be the only person in the courtroom that doesn't know what happened that day.
That makes sense. It's how can you defend someone if you don't really know what the truth is? And so, it's interesting. It's guilty, beyond a reasonable doubt, or you're innocent until proven guilty. And so, that makes sense to me that you want to know. It's like, a better defense is me knowing what the truth is. But that's life in general, that the truth really sets us free. And freedom don't always mean that I may go home. It just means that there's an inward freedom, that one experiences when they can be truthful, with, in this case, we're talking about, someone committing, some type of, or being accused of committing a crime.
And that's a very good point too, Professor Goodman. And we want to be able to get our audience involved. And Patrick, are you ready to answer some questions from our audience?
Sure.
All right. Welcome to Seeds of Wealth and Wellness. Caller, you're on the air.
Yes, good evening. I just want to ask a question of the attorney. When most of the time you take certain cases that are going on and a person comes in, and I've known for several people, it look like when they paid the attorney a lot of money, it looked like they got less time. Then you, versus having a court-appointed attorney, sometimes you wind up with more time. Can you comment on that?
Well, you're talking about after trial or on a plea bargain?
No, I'm talking about when the trial is going, when a person have need of attorney and it's a major type charge that they have, and looked as though if they paid the attorney a lot of money, they, instead of getting maybe 25 years, they get maybe 10 years.
And Patrick, we had just finished talking about that too. when an attorney has resources, financial resource to prepare a case, and then sometimes that case might involve hiring a private investigator, sometimes it might be involved in looking at paper after paper after paper, or even hiring a psychologist, a psychiatrist to get involved in it. Is there a difference in an attorney being well funded versus having little or no money at all to prepare the case? Does that affect the case?
Absolutely. If you have the money on the case to hire investigators and to prepare the case that way, what you're going up against is the Commonwealth Attorney, is the prosecutor in criminal cases in Virginia, and they have the police department working for them. They have almost unlimited resources that they can call on in preparing their case. A court-appointed attorney has very little in the way of resources to prepare these cases, and I think that makes a big difference. In serious cases, you can get an investigator appointed by the court, but that's in select cases.
So to answer the caller's question, if a case is well funded, meaning that there is money available, that can decrease the amount of time someone spends incarcerated? Because that's what his question was.
It can make a difference. How the case is prepared, the performance of an attorney in a criminal case is important. And how they come across, because the attorney is trying to persuade the judge. If it's a matter of sentencing, you're trying to persuade the judge why your client get less time than, in this particular case, why your client is entitled to serve less time. To answer your question, I think, was what's the difference between, want somebody to get 10 years for somebody else to get 25. And there's a couple of questions involved. If it was a jury trial, it was sentenced by the jury. If it was a judge trial, they're sentenced by the judge. And then you get into, with judges, some judges have a tendency to sentence more harshly than others. That's something where it's good to have an attorney that practices in that court a lot, that's familiar with all the judges. And court-appointed attorneys do have a lot of experience in the courts they're appointed in.
Okay.
And that's one advantage.
I understand what he's saying, but my question still remains the same. It seems like you're answering the question, but you're going around Robert Hood's bond. I know you are an attorney. Okay, my question also is this. When you have, as you said, the Commonwealth Attorney or District Attorney, whichever state you live in, all right, you're saying they have the police department. What about the fact a lot of them, they have evidence that they are supposed to turn over to the defense attorney? Now, in some cases, if you got a court-appointed attorney, he's getting paid by the state also, so he's more than apt to go along with these quote-unquote plea agreements, which a lot of times it winds up, the person wind up with more time because they are being badgered, and it may be innocent. I mean, the state of Virginia, and I'm not trying to think about your time, the state of Virginia has some laws that are still, as was made years ago, called Jim Crow laws, and some of those laws are still in effect right today in 2013, even with these judges. Some of these judges, I don't want to get precise, but I know people that work in the court system here, right in the city of Richmond, and most of the time, most of the law enforcement in there, they know which way that judge is going to rule on a case. I may not have went to school for law, sir, but I do have some knowledge of the legal system, and I'm not dumb. And this situation where you're saying a lot of times these attorneys, and I've known for a fact, attorneys take in a lot of money. If there's a drug case, and this particular drug dealer got the money, he's going to give up the money because he does not want to do those 25 years. He's going to give up the money. He may not get 25, and he might get 10. Or he might not, if they can't really make a strong case against him, he might not get none at all. And I'm going to let you go and answer to that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And the caller is a question. I have to believe, or I have to, and I don't have a poll to deal with this, Patrick, but if I have the ability to financial resources, I do believe that would help me prepare a better defense, even when it comes to sentencing. Because if I have financial resources, I get an opportunity to potentially, before I get sentenced, to get a psychiatrist evaluation. I get a psychologist evaluation. I can dispute the police evidence by bringing my own private investigator on board. And so I just believe that there are numerous resources that I have available to me when I'm well funded.
Right, but I think, what I'm hearing the caller not just saying, but I can hear your annoyance or the sense of injustice is kind of what I'm hearing the caller express, that there's a lack of fairness somewhere for someone who has the resources to pay for such a defense. They commit the same crime as, this person over here. And, because they have money, and depending on the judge that they get, then they may not get the same time as the next person who did the exact same thing, but they get more time. So I don't really know that we have an answer for that, but it is definitely a real situation. And hopefully as time goes on, I mean, some of the stuff that we deal with on a day-to-day basis may or may not change, but I think it's important to keep things before the public eye in terms of just our concerns about some things, because it is really, as I said, we all here to make a difference.
Well, let's see what Patrick, what is your take on that?
Well, one thing that the caller said that bothered me was he made a comment about people being badgered into making guilty pleas on cases, and I don't know that doesn't happen or that it does happen. I know that I have never badgered anybody. I've never even asked anybody to plead guilty on a case that they didn't do, that they were innocent. And there are some situations where there have been plea bargains. And one thing that's always enticing on a plea bargain is when they'll take a felony off the table and reduce it to a misdemeanor. That's a hard one to pass up. If you can get a felony reduced to a misdemeanor on a plea bargain, in my opinion, it's still important whether or not the crime was actually committed by the defendant, but it gets more tempting when things like that happen.
Are there opportunities or times when an awesome plea bargain does come into play? A felony is reduced to a misdemeanor, but at the same time, I have a client that I know might not have even committed this case, but we're looking now at, we're rolling the dice, and we're looking now at, Pat, the element, can we win this case? Or how much would it cost us to win this case? Or is there a chance that the jury might be swayed? Or if it's a judge trial, will the judge be swayed? And so now I have a client that might not be well funded, but at the same time I say, well, look here, maybe this plea bargain might be an opportunity for us. So that's what they're saying is injustice taking place. And it might not be a client of yours, but has it happened before?
Somebody pleading guilty on something that they didn't do? Yeah, it has. In fact, I believe that I've had clients that in a situation like that, a felony reduced to a misdemeanor, and said, well, they would rather go ahead and take a misdemeanor conviction rather than roll the dice on a felony trial.
And does it also play a role on whether or not we're going to have a judge trial or a jury trial?
A judge trial or a jury trial, to me, depends a lot on whether it's a question of law or a question of fact. If it's a question of law, you want to judge.
Now, we also talk about the different jurisdictions. We have in this area, Henrico, Chesterfield, and Richmond. And we know those areas, as close as we are, there are very different dynamics in these three jurisdictions. And Hanover. Could you speak a little bit? What do you feel with the difference between Hanover, Chesterfield, Richmond, and Henrico? Where would you rather try a case?
Personally, I like Chesterfield. That's the county I live in, but I just have done pretty well in Chesterfield, and I do like some of the other courts too. Henrico Juvenile is a good court. you know, there are a number of good courts around. I hardly ever go to Hanover, so I can't really speak to their courts. But and the city of Richmond does a fine job as well.
Is there a difference in the training of the police officers in the different jurisdictions? I noticed that many of the officers are well educated, even in Henrico County, versus the